We are wrapping up this legislative session, and the way things work around here, we're kind of like kids in school who don't study for the test, and then they take the day off from school to skip the test, and then a week later when their test is due, they cram the night before and try to squeeze it all in. That's no way to get educated, and it's certainly no way to run a great state. And it's unfortunate because we are cramming a whole bunch of unrelated bills into one omnibus bill. It's late at night here. We're going to vote on this bill where we just got a chance to look at it a couple hours ago. The governor is calling for a message of necessity, which is a way of bypassing the state constitutional provision that requires 3 days to review a bill. Legislators can review, talk to their constituents, talk to experts. That's being bypassed here, even though it's not an emergency, which is when the message of necessity is supposed to be used. So even if it was the greatest piece of legislation in the world, which it's not, but even if it was, based on that, a no vote is appropriate. We have extended rent control in this bill that's going to be voted on soon. Rent control, if you look at it, it actually increases the price of market rate housing and squeezes the middle class. It's ripe for abuse. We didn't even get income verification as part of rent control extension, so people making, well into six figures don't have a $400, $500, $600 rent controlled apartment, which goes on. And the biggest thing we should have done, if the city was insisting on having rent control, we should have said, sure, you want your rent control? Let's repeal the SAFE Act. That would make upstate New York very happy. And if I had to boil down the biggest problem with this big ugly, which is called for a very good reason, the biggest problem is it's incredibly New York City centric, and there's very little to help struggling upstate New York. Rent control is New York City. 421A is a tax abatement program that goes back 30 years to when no one wanted to live in New York City. Well, thanks to some good mayors there in the past, we cleaned up crime there, and everyone wants to live in New York City, and the real estate market is booming, and we don't need to subsidize developers who want to build residential housing in New York City, but we're continuing to do that. And if you're familiar with the term 421A, it's probably because that program was at the heart of the Silver indictment earlier this year and the Skelos indictment. So it's a corporate welfare scheme. Corporate welfare always leads to corruption. It exacerbates the pay-to-play culture here in Albany. The biggest donors to both sides, Republican and Democrat, legislative and executive, are some of these real estate developers and the organizations they started. And we're extending a program that has helped lead to 2 indictments of 2 of the most powerful people in the state. And we're going to go in that room, and it's likely going to be extended. How is that helping anyone in New York State at all, except for a few developers, and it's doing nothing for upstate New York? And we had a couple of ideas that were kicked around this session to raise the age for prosecutions in criminal court, and also to assign special prosecutors if police officers are involved in the death of a person. And agreement couldn't be reached between the legislative branch and the executive branch. So instead of coming back next session to work on it, the governor has said, you know what, I'm going to deal with those things through executive fiat. Well, that's not the way that our system works. We have a system of separation of powers for good reason. We have a system of checks and balance for good reason, and it's to protect our rights and make sure that one branch doesn't get too strong and that there's check on power. But the governor is kind of usurping some legislative authority, and it seems like some of the legislative leaders are willing to allow that to happen. So it is unfortunate that the session is ending this way. Are we better off than we were in January when we started this session as a state? I don't think we are. Taxes are still high. Regulation is still high. We have a corporate welfare scheme that is synonymous with boondoggle. It's called Startup New York, $53 million in TV ads and 76 jobs created. We should have realized now, this program's not working. Let's cut our losses. Let's put that tens of millions of dollars into across-the-board tax relief for all New Yorkers. Instead, we're not even going to address that problem. So it's with great disappointment that I am standing here today. I'm going to be voting against the big ugly, as it's called, and going to continue to fight for all the things I've been fighting for. But not a great day here in Albany. I think we're proving all the critics right that this is a dysfunctional place, and even if you change some of the leaders, very little change is in reality here.